Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on building an on-demand Jupyter Notebook instance using AWS. My name is Jason Bondersmith. I am a data consultant and the creator of nothotdog.cloud. And today, like I mentioned, we're going to be building a Jupyter Notebook. We're going to have a few tools we're going to be able to use, one of which is obviously Amazon Web Services. We're going to practice some of our Linux skills. We're going to actually connect to AWS using a Windows machine, which makes it a little bit harder, but that's okay. We'll get through it. And then finally, we are going to do some neat things on top of what we create so that it'll allow it to be on demand and super cheap. So if you're excited to do that, let's get started. Now, I do want to note that there's a couple things we need to get done ahead of time. It's important to have an Amazon account set up and ready to go. And we also need to have an S3 bucket that we can use. So please do those steps first. Those links for that will be in the blog ahead of this. And once you do those, we can go ahead and get started. So let's do it. So we're going to start here on our Amazon services page. If you're not familiar with Amazon, this is all of the service Amazon offers. We are going to be focused today on EC2, which is their compute service, and S3. So EC2, actually, to get a high-level look at what we're going to do, here is us on our local Windows machine. This is our EC2 instance right here. So the first thing we're going to do is create this instance. We're going to have to do a couple steps that allow our machine that we're on right now to talk to our new instance. We're going to use a program called Putty for that. So I'll show you that. Once we're in here, we are going to, or while we create this, we're actually going to create a role. Roles are, it's nomenclature used by Amazon. You can definitely Google it if you want to check it out. Essentially, what it's going to do is allow our Linux instance to talk to our S3 bucket. And then in our S3 bucket is where we're going to keep our code. Once we're up and running, we are going to sync between our S3 bucket and our instance so that we keep all of our files. And once we have it up and running, we are going to be able to connect to our notebook whenever we fire it up through the web, no matter where we are. So that's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to get started in EC2. So the first thing we want to do is hit Launch Instance. And right up top, you'll see Amazon Linux 2 AMI. That's what we're going to be using, so go ahead and hit Select on that. In here, you can select the size of your instance. As you write more and more advanced code and you need more processing power, maybe you want to select one of the larger instances, but we're going to go with our free eligible micro instance. In configuring the instance details, you want to make sure you have that role set up, S3 admin access. If you don't have that set up, I think I put that in the pre-work, but you can say create new IAM role there, right next to it. You can hit create role. We're going to use EC2. Again, you can see right here, allow EC2 instances to call other services on your behalf. And what are we going to allow it to do? If you type in S3, we're going to say we're going to give it full access to S3, and then hit review. Put in a role name, maybe a little description, and you hit create role. I've already done that. So I'm going to leave that as is. Add storage. This is the hard drive that's going to be attached to your instance. We don't need to make any changes to that. Add tags. If you're building a lot of these or you have a lot of machines in the enterprise, you can add tags here. That'll help you find what you've done later. We don't need to worry about that right now. Configure the security group. This is pretty important. We need to have this set up correctly to allow access from from wherever we are. I have one set up. And so what you're going to do, if you don't have one set up, you can set it up just like this. We're going to have a custom TCP rule, and that's going to open up port 8888. So you'll notice that when we have our notebook set up and we go into it, we are going to connect via this port. And then SSH we need to open up, and we're going to open up port 22. Now, it's important to note that we are allowing traffic to our instance from anywhere. That makes it susceptible to people maybe hacking in if they were so inclined, if you had something that was important somebody wanted to get. So you can limit this to where you're coming from if you want to be more secure, but for now we're just going to leave it so we can access it from anywhere. Review and launch. Being abnormally slow. Let's try again. Review and launch. Okay. And we're good to go. So we're going to hit launch. And here's another important thing. So we're going to create a key pair that's going to allow our machines to talk to each other. So I have some pairs that I like to use, but for this example, let's create a new one. Let's call it my key pair. And you want to make sure you download the key pair. And you'll see it downloads a .pem file, PEM, and launch instance. Let's go back to our instances. And you can see right here, it's starting up. One thing I like to do is just, if you hit the little pencil right here, you can create a name for it. So if you have a few instances, you know which one is doing what. So now we're ready to access our instance. Now, if you had a Linux machine or a Mac machine, Amazon makes it very easy to connect. In fact, if you have your instance selected and you just hit the connect button up here, here's your instructions to connect. I would like to connect with a standalone SSH client. For Mac and Linux users, it is as easy as navigating to where your key file is, that .pem file, and running this command. Because Windows is Windows, we need to use an application called PuTTY. And in fact, when you're in this connect spot, find out how to connect using PuTTY. If you click this link, it gives you very detailed instructions, but we're going to walk through that right now. So let's go ahead and open up PuTTY. And the first program we're going to use is PuTTY Gen. So PuTTY obviously isn't going to use the .pem, so we need to convert it. So we're going to hit load right here. And it's going to be looking for these for .ppk. Let's hit all files. And my key pair, this is that key pair that we had just downloaded. Says it imported it just fine. Then we're going to hit save private key. So we don't need to mess with anything up here. Make sure RSA is selected, which I think it is by default, and then hit save private key. Are you sure you want to do it without a passphrase? Yes, I am. And then we'll say my key pair. And we can save it. So we can close that. And then now we're ready to open up the PuTTY program. So click on PuTTY. Drag it over here. And again, when we go into connect here, you can see on this example, it says EC2 user at blah, 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 blah. This is going to put in the same address as the instance you just launched. So I like to copy it from here. Your other option is this is the public DNS, the address of your instance. You can get it from here as well. And so for host name inside of PuTTY, we're going to hit paste. And you notice here it says port 22. Again, just circling back to when we set up our security group, we want to have access to that. The only other thing we need to do in here before we connect is under SSH, over here you see connection, SSH, hit the little plus button, and you have auth, AUTH. And right here where it says private key file for authentication, that's where it's looking for that file that we just converted, the mykeypair.ppk. So we're going to put that in there. Going back to session, it is a good idea to save this. It makes it easier to log in later. So we'll say Jupyter. Jupyter. Let's hit save. And then you can either hit open or load, double click. So PuTTY's just telling you that the host key is not cached. That's okay. Just hit yes. We want to connect anyways. And now you can see right here, Amazon Linux 2 AMI, we are connected to our machine. So going back to our diagram, here's our machine. We used PuTTY to help us travel down this road, and we are connected into our machine right here. Now from here, everything's going to be the same between Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever it might be. So the first thing we want to do, if you are familiar, Anaconda is a open source platform that makes it very easy to use Python tools. That's probably not what we want. Let's say Anaconda Python. And if we just go to the home page. So here's the home page. It wants you to sign up. But what we can do is say download Anaconda. And it's going to say download for Windows, Mac, Linux. And you need to remember that we are using a Linux machine. So we want to get the Linux file. We are not going to install it locally. So right here, you can choose Linux, Python 3.6. You can see here 64-bit installer. If we right click, copy link address, that's what we're going to put in here. So we're going to use this command. This is a Linux command wget. Wget is going to go out and get a link that you type in. Here's the link that we just copied. Make sure it is surrounded in quotes and hit enter. And so it's downloading that install file. The next command we're going to use is called bash. That's going to execute the file we just downloaded. So do bash Anaconda 3-5.2.0 -x86 _64 sh. Hit enter, and this is going to walk you through the installation. So to continue with the installation, press enter. As with everything else in the world, we have a license agreement, so you can just enter through this. It's going to take a little while. Just hold down enter, you'll be fine. And then it's going to ask you yes or no, do you agree? Of course we do. Next question is the install location. If you want to change the location on your Linux machine, you would do it here, but we want it to be default. So we hit enter again. So this is going to take a minute to install, and I'm going to pause the video while it does so. All right, so we're almost done installing. It pops up and asks if you wanted to add it to your path. I'm not going to go into exactly what that's doing. I do find it helpful. So we're going to type in yes and hit enter. And then it says, thanks for installing Anaconda. Now, right now the machine, so the default machine comes with Python installed on it. And if you type in Python, you'll see that it says Python 2.7. You'll remember that we actually downloaded 3.6. So what we want to do is tell it, hey, I want you to use what we downloaded. So say source.bash rc, going to source. And then now if you type in Python, you'll see it's looking at Python 3.6, which is what we want. So let's exit out of there. Now back on the command line now, I'm not sure how long you may or may not have been using Jupyter Notebooks, but it used to be IPython, and in the installation, it still goes by IPython. So we're going to type in IPython, because what we're going to do now is set up some configuration for our notebook. So IPython, capital I, capital P. Made a liar out of me. All lowercase, of course. IPython, all lowercase. And then we're going to run a Python command, an install file. So we're going to say from, in this line, we need capital I, capital P. From ipython.lib, import password passwd. And then we're going to run the passwd function. And what this is doing is allowing us to set up a password for our notebook. So no matter where you log in, it does have a slight bit of protection if you want to make sure you have password protection on it. So I love Jupyter. I love Jupyter. So what it's going to output is this SHA line. That's just your password reformatted. And so what we're going to do, use Control-C. This sometimes is a little tricky to get it copied. Right-clicking doesn't always work. Let's try Control-C. Let's just find a little scratch pad. We're going to use it later, so just paste it into a text file for now. And once you have that copied in, you can type in exit, and we'll be back at the command line. The next thing we're going to do, we are going to set up a configuration file. We're going to say Jupyter Notebook -- generate -config. And you can see it writes to that line that it output. That is just creating a default file. We're going to jump into that file in a minute. A little bit of Linux here. Make dir, mkdir, that means make directory. We're going to make a directory called certs. cd is change directory. So change directory to certs. We are now in our certs folder. And then we are going to run a fairly long command, sudo openSSL req -x509. And I will have this code on the blog that you can just cut and paste in here. 5 new key. mycert.pem out mycert.pem. Now I'm not super familiar with certificates, SSL certificates. I know it has to do with how web servers talk to each other, but I don't know the ins and outs, but I do know we want to create this file. And it is going to ask you for some information. You can just kind of do generic information here, state, locality, name, email, and we're done. So created, ls is another Linux command that will show files. If you type in ls, you can see that mycert.pem, that's the file we just created. Let's type in cd and hit enter. We're going to go back to our root directory. And now we are going to play with that configuration file that we created. So we're going to say nano. Nano is a text editing program inside of Linux. You can think of it like Notepad++ or Sublime Text. Nano is the program that allows you to edit text. And so we're going to say .jupyter / Jupyter Notebook config.py. Again, just scrolling up a little bit, you'll be able to see this is the file that we previously created when we said generate config. And so now we're just going to go in and edit that file. Similar to other programming languages, the pound signs comment out all the code. That is okay. We're going to go all the way to the bottom and enter our own code. Again, I'll have this available to cut and paste for you, but I'm going to do it manually. Might be a good time to catch up if you're getting behind on anything. C = get config c.ip. So you can think of this as, if you're on your phone or some application that has a settings file and you go in and manually edit some settings. Basically what we're doing is doing those settings right here. So this first one, the kernel app inline, some of you might be familiar with that if you've used Python in the past. When you generate a graph, it can either kick it out in a different page or a different screen, or it can do it inline in the notebook. We're saying we want it inline in the notebook. Notebook app cert file. We're going to point it to that cert file that we just made. We're We're going to start with the letter U and then do our single quote home/ec2-user/certs/mycert.pem c.notebook.app.ip. We're going to put in a star. We're going to allow all IP addresses to access it. c.notebook.app.open browser. This one's pretty important because we aren't in a graphical user interface. We are connecting to this sort of behind the scenes. We're going to say we don't want you to open the browser. Type in false. App.password. Now, remember we created our SHA line based on what our password was. We are going to copy and paste that in there. A single right click will paste. So if you copy from over here, put your cursor in here and right click, it'll paste that in. And then jumping down a line. Last one is port. And again, we are going to connect through port 8888. That's it. So those are our settings. Once you have those, you hit Control X. If you want to save it, Y equals yes, and then hit enter, and it saved that file. Believe it or not, we are ready to launch our Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook, that's the command, and it's going to start it up. So it's going to tell you it's running here internally. That's not where we are going to navigate to. If you go back to your EC2 console, again, this is the public DNS. So if there's a little button over here that pops up. Well, usually pops up. There it is. Copy to clipboard. And if you go to a new tab, https / paste that in. And then on the end, we want to put colon 8888. It's going to tell you it's scared. Your connection is not private. It doesn't know about the certificate. That's okay. We know what we've done. We're going to hit advanced, and then it's going to say proceed. What do you know? Here is our Jupyter Notebook. The password, I love Jupyter. And there you go. Now you can hit new notebook. Or import pandas as PD. Import pandas as PD. And we're writing Python. You can install packages through the notebook and or through your machine, whatever you want to do. So that was fairly quick and easy, but it's limited. So you have to have your instance running on Amazon, either whether you're using it or not. You could shut it down if you wanted. You could save this instance and shut it down. But what if you wanted to make different notebooks, or I'm sorry, not different notebooks, but if you wanted to fire it up on different machines or try different iterations, things like that, there's some more powerful add-on items that we can do. So if we go back, if you hit Control-C, shut down the kernel, yes. I'm going to shut it down. We can test that. There you go. It says connection failed. It's not running anymore. And we're going to enter a command, no hup, no HUP, Jupyter Notebook. What that's going to do is fire up Jupyter Notebook in the background. So if you were to close this, are you sure you want to close the session? Yes, I am. Sure, we can reload. And now it's running. So it is SPD. It's still running. We're not connected via PuTTY right now, but the machine is sitting on Amazon and it's running. But let's go ahead and reconnect anyways. So let's go back into PuTTY. Oops. And this will be nice and easy. We have it saved. So if you double click on what it was saved in PuTTY, so we're back in the instance. It's still serving up our notebook. And here's the first really powerful thing we're going to do. We are going to allow programmatic access to our S3 bucket. We're going to sync from our S3 bucket. So for me, in my S3 service, I have Vondi notebooks. That's where I keep my Python notebooks. And what I want to do is just sync all of this stuff, all of these files. Let's say I have a notebook or a file or something I want to use, and I upload it to my S3 bucket, but I want to use it over here. We are going to sync between our machine and the S3 bucket. And how we do that is we install a program. So say pip install AWS CLI. That stands for command line interface. So it installs that fairly quickly. And then we're going to say AWS configure. So if you did some of the pre-work and you created a user and downloaded your .csv file, you are going to have an access key ID and a secret access key ID. So I'm going to open mine off screen for fairly obvious reasons. Again, you want to make sure you do not let these keys get out of your hands. It can give somebody access to your entire Amazon account. Amazon suggests a lot of different creating different users and different roles to limit the access, but you definitely want to make sure that you keep your keys and your secret key to yourself. So I'm going to pause the video right now while I get those keys, and then we'll start back up. All right, so I entered my keys. If you were getting ahead of me, you put in your key and your secret access key. The next thing it's going to ask for you is your default region name. Now, Amazon works in different regions. Depends on what you choose as your default. I default to US East 1. So if we go back to Amazon, see we're in the Northern Virginia region. I'm trying to see where it shows that. We can see it in here in our EC2. Also, availability zone. When you fire up an instance, it's going to go to your default region. So when setting up your command line access, it says default region name. You just want US-East-1. You don't have to worry about the letter. All right, so let's clear this out. How do we know that that's working? Well, let's say AWS S3 LS. And so if you've done this correctly, this list of S3 buckets should match. If we go back to S3 over here, you can see we've now set up programmatic access between our EC2 instance and our S3 buckets. Let's clear that. And now, what was the point of that? Well, what we want to do is if we have a unique bucket for our notebooks, we want to sync those files over. So what I want to do is make dir. We've used that command before. Make directory notebooks. Let's switch into our notebooks folder, and then we are going to run a command: AWS S3 sync S3 on the notebooks to the local folder. So that's fairly straightforward. Again, the command is AWS. That's the program we're using. We're going to use the S3 portion of it, and we're going to say sync. And the first file or the first location you put in, which for me is my Vondi Notebooks S3 bucket, and the dot here just says sync it in the folder where I am. So we can hit enter on that. And you can see that all the files coming in, this is the same list of files that are over here in my notebooks bucket. Awesome. The other cool thing is, now that those are in there, when you go back home, if you go back to where you have your Jupyter Notebook running, you're connected into your instance, you can see the notebooks folder shows up. So again, if I had a Python notebook, fire it up, and we're ready to code. Very cool stuff. But again, if we were to have this on demand, if we were to leave it running, we're going to incur the charges of Amazon. And what we want to do is have a lot of this stuff happen behind the scenes automatically. So within our notebooks folder, let's clear this off the screen. We're going to create a file. We're going to say sudo nano. Remember, nano is our text editor. We're going to create a file called backup.sh. First line is going to be, again, I will put this in the blog so you can cut and paste. sh. AWS S3 sync notebooks with our S3 bucket. So what we're doing, again, we're building this file, this backup.sh file. We're going to have this file run automatically. I'm going to set it up, maybe go every 5 minutes. You can really set it up how often you want. But the one thing I want to put in here is that if I have an S3 bucket that maybe I have other files in, I don't want them to sync over. I want this to only back up my Python notebook files. So I'm going to say -- exclude. And in Linux, that -- that's called a flag. And basically what that's going to do is it's an option on this command. So we're going to say exclude all files. This is going to run in order. So we're going to say don't sync anything. But then we're going to say -- include any .ipy notebook files. So it's going to, so when this command runs, it's going to say I am going to sync my local notebooks folder with my S3 bucket. I'm excluding everything, but then I'm going to include .ipynb. If you want to include other file types, if you want to do this with, say, Excel files, you just do this exact same command, except for .ipynb, you would put in .xls or whatever it might be. The other thing we want to do is sync this back to our machine. So let's say we're in the middle of programming, we realize we need a CSV file, we upload it to our bucket, and we want it to come over. So what we're going to do is say sync the bucket with our notebooks folder. Again, let's exclude everything, and let's include, I don't know, CSV files. IPy notebooks, whatever you want to put in there. And that's it for that file. So again, Control X, yes, save my changes, and enter. And again, if we use ls right here in our notebooks, see everything that our Python notebooks synced over, and also this backup.sh that we created. Let's clear that. Let's hit CD and go back to our root directory. And what we're going to do now is type in crontab -e. Now what crontab does is you can think of crontab as a scheduler. It's a very powerful scheduler. It's if you know Linux, you know crontab. So crontab uses another text editor. I find it a little difficult to use. If you just, I always hit S. If you just start typing S, it'll allow you to start typing. I would encourage you to Google crontab. It'll show you the setup. But what we're going to do is say */ let's just do 2. And then *** / notebooks / backup.sh. What that's doing is it's, if you think of those stars go, let's see if I can get it right, minutes, hours, days, weeks, years. something like that. So if you wanted to sync something every February, every other year, you could set that up with these stars. Again, Google it. It'll show you how to do it. But what we're saying is every 2 minutes, I want you to run that backup.sh file. To get out of this, let's see, we hit escape. Hit the escape key, then the colon key, and type in WQ. That's basically your save and exit, and hit enter. Every 2 minutes, it's going to run our backup.sh. But let's say maybe we put that as 10 minutes or 20 minutes and we uploaded a file. All we would have to do is from our root directory, type in /notebook/backup.sh. Hit enter. Nope. Notebooks/backup.sh. Sudo notebook/backup.sh. That should allow us to run it. Let's do this. Let's do change directory notebooks. If you say ./backup.sh, he's not found. All right, we'll have to troubleshoot that. Let me pause the video and we'll see what's going on there. All right. So as with everything that we do in technology, there's always a little bit of troubleshooting no matter what you do. What we neglected to do is if we go back into our CD notebooks, we need to make the file we made executable. So we're going to say sudo chmod +x, that makes it executable, and then backup.sh. Sudo chmod +x backup.sh. If we go back to our root folder, now if we say sudo notebooks/backup.sh, it's going to run that sync. One way you'll be able to tell is if you go back to your S3 bucket, I believe we should have, let's refresh this for fun. Let's see if we have a new backup.sh file in here. Well, duh, we told it to only sync our Python files. So a better test, let's go back to our notebooks and let's say new notebook. And let's just change the name to I am syncing. Rename it. We'll just put a command in here for fun. Import pandas as PD. Okay. So you'll see, let's go back to our machine, CD notebooks, ls, and in here, let's save it. So hit save, let's hit ls again, and we should see here's our I am syncing notebook. So let's go back again to our root directory and let's run sudo notebooks/backup.sh. And now if that works, so you can see here it uploaded notebooks. I am syncing over to our bucket. And just to confirm for the last time, let's see if we need to refresh or not. Let's try giving it a refresh. There it is. I am syncing. Perfect. So we now have our files syncing back and forth. So how do we make this truly on demand. So let's go ahead and close this. We're going to close that session. I think this is going to, oh no, we ran no hup, so this is still running in the background. So if we go back over to EC2, here's our Jupyter Notebook. What we want to do is create an image of that. Now, if you remember when we launched our instance the first time, we picked the Linux AMI instance. But what we're going to do is create our own AMI, and the next time we launch the machine, we're going to have the exact same setup. So let's say actions. First thing we want to do is stop it. So instance state and hit stop. That is going to shut down our machine. And then we're going to say actions, image, create image. So the image name is my new Jupyter instance. We'll use the same thing for description. We're going to leave everything as is, and we're going to hit create image. So you can see here it says it's still trying to stop it, so let's wait for the instance to get stopped. And actually, this is going to take about 15 minutes, not to stop the instance, but to create the image. So I'm going to pause the video here, and once this, there we go. It says stopped. We're going to hit create image. And so the request is received. Now, again, this is going to take about 15 minutes, so I'm going to pause the video. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back. We're going to very daringly delete our Jupyter Notebook instance. And then we're going to fire up a new one, and we're going to see if everything we did stays put. So we will be back. Alrighty, welcome back. I am still in the AMIs tab. And as you can see, my new Jupyter instance is available. So let's go back to EC2 dashboard. We're going to hit launch instance. And remember before we used this Linux AMI, but instead this time we're going to click on my AMIs, my new Jupyter instance, select. Excuse me, we're going to keep it at micro. Again, same steps here. We want to make sure we pick our S3 admin role, storage, tags, security group. Go back and use the security group that you were using, review and launch. And then launch. Make sure you can either create a new you can create a new key pair again if you've lost your other one. You're going to have to go back and do some steps. I would advise just using what you've had. Everything's going to stay the same. And then we're going to hit launched instances. So let's view our instances. And we can see this one's firing up. Now, if we go back into PuTTY, remember before we saved our settings. So let's click on where we saved it and hit load. And then all we need to do is every time you start up an EC2 instance, it's going to get its own public DNS address. And so we're just going to update the address with our new one. So you can see our new one here, 54.88.208.127. Let's do 54.208. Nope, sorry, 54.88.208.127. So update that. That's the only thing you need to update, and then hit open. Similar error as when we went through this the first time. And then we're back in. And it's going to be as easy as no hup, Jupyter Notebook. So it's starting the notebook. Now, if you remember, what do? We go into our instance, we copy our public DNS, https // paste that in, :8888. Enter. And we are right back in to our notebook on our new machine. Same password. And we're in. And we've already got our... So what's going to happen is when you launch that new instance, it's going to have the notebooks folder the exact same way. And it's going to start syncing again. So you want to be careful that you don't sync back from your machine to an S3 bucket if you've made changes in here. Now, S3 does do version control, so if that happens to happen, you can get an old version back, but we want to make sure we don't do that. So there you go. So that is your on-demand Jupyter Notebook instance. If you want to start coding in Python, now is a great time to do that. I'm going to do a couple more things here. Well, the first thing we should do, and the reason that we created that image is we want to save money from having these instances started. So let's go ahead and shut down all of our instances. So you do actions, instance state, and terminate. Once those are terminated, they are gone. You will not incur fees for when they're not running. But let's do two other add-on items here if you want to stick around for a little bonus content. Let's go and hit Launch Instance, My AMIs, my new Jupyter instance, configure the instance details. Now in here, this is where we pick our S3 role. Down here, we have advanced details. I don't know if you noticed when we fired up our instance, it was the Linux AMI, those things get outdated. It said, hey, run this command sudo yum update. Now yum update, it's the same thing as, if you think about it in Windows, you get your auto updates or on your phone. The App Store wants to update your software packages. Sudo yum update is going to run those updates for us. And so what we can do in here is say, as you're booting, run these commands. Sudo yum update. And now I'm just going to go rogue here. I believe what we can do is run sudo AWS S3 sync our notebooks with our notebook folder locally. Now, I haven't tested this. Well, what's going to happen is when you boot your instance, it's going to run these two commands. Sudo AWS S3 sync my S3 bucket with my notebooks folder. And I think I might have that backwards. Nope, notebooks. Perfect. So let's hit add storage. We'll click through as we've done. Change our security group. Review and launch. Launch. Use our key pair. Oops. All right, so just like we did a minute ago, let's load EC252 87 194 97, hit open. Yes. Well, it looks like it's still telling us to apply more updates. Update. This is the command I wanted it to run while we were booting. Yes. Looks like it might not have worked. What I'll do is I'll add some comments in there in the blog as we get finished and make a note on that. But again, there you go. There's your on-demand. Bring me back over here. There's your on-demand Jupyter Notebook instance. I hope that was fun for you guys. If you have any questions, I'm sure you do, feel free to hit me up. My contact information is on the website, nothotdog.cloud. I hope you have fun coding in your Python notebooks.